So I'd like to share with you some of the research we've been doing for ACAPS over the last 2 years, where we've been asked to look at, if you like, operational research. What actually happens in field operations? How do people really use needs assessment data? Do they use it to drive their programs, or is it just something extra on the side? So we've been doing this work in 3 or 4 countries, and what's fascinating is that you do come up with a set of sort of commonalities across those countries. Now, if I can, I'd like to sort of take you through those. The first thing we've found is that actually there's a lot of very good needs assessment being done. The methodologies are really quite rigorous. The challenge is it's inconsistent. Not every agency applies the methodologies. Not every agency is doing good nutritional assessments, good WASH assessments. So judging whether the numbers you see on paper are rigorous is a real challenge, particularly at the needs coordination side. You may have numbers, but you've no idea whether they are accurate, whether they are consistent year after year. So there's a huge challenge around getting consistency in the way the agencies, whether they're UN or NGO or local, carry out needs assessments. I think that's the first sort of major finding. But in a sense, it's a positive one because it's saying the underlying methodologies are good. The issue is training and consistency. The second issue we're finding is around context. The way in which you interpret figures depends so much on understanding the politics, the sociology, the economics of what's going on in a country. Just knowing what the malnutrition rate is and knowing it very accurately and how it's changed, it just isn't enough. You need to understand whether this is coming from a background of endemic poverty or whether this is a malnutrition rate caused by a very recent shock, because how you respond will depend upon that context. And not just malnutrition, but information around interpreting market prices, interpreting the movement of people. Movement of people in some societies is a traditional response to crises. In other, it's very much a protection issue. It's fleeing from violence. So you have to understand this context. And I think what that hints at is, particularly in long-term crises and ongoing crises, humanitarian response isn't about short term, and it isn't about employing people for a few months in country. You really need to be embedded into the guts of that country and understand its politics and its economics and the way it works. It's got much more in common, if you like, with development programming. The second bit of context analysis that comes out is, in a sense, it's something we all know, but we tend not to admit, that data only works if you can convince somebody to do something with it. In other words, how you message that data is really important. And the reality is that responding to almost every crisis in the world is an intensely political issue. It's certainly intensely political for local politicians. It's their community, either their community that they're slightly frightened of or the community that they rely upon to vote them into office. So for them, it's a really political issue. And understanding how to package that data into the message that will work with that ministry or that politician or that president in that country or that year is a real set of skills. It's the stuff of diplomacy, if you like. And I think humanitarian agencies have got to take this on board, that part of their job is packaging the data into messages that will work in that country. It's exciting times. I mean, I think this whole business of the way in which needs assessment feeds into a response, how people choose which type of response to do, and the way in which they're able to adapt it year after year, because the reality is almost all the crises we respond to have been there before. They're not one-off events.